Hey there, welcome to episode 46 of the Cafe Genius Impresarios audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. I'm recording this on the morning of January 12, 2024. It is the last day of CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, arguably one of the larger, or if not the largest, trade show here in Vegas. It's been a good week, very long, a lot of talking. My voice probably sounds a little bit different, and my allergies are totally kicking butt. So let's get to it. This show hopefully will be a little bit shorter than usual. We'll find out. Solo again, although this and many other topics would be great for an actual discussion. So my New Year's resolution is to get back to trying to book guests. Cross your fingers. But today we are talking about the open loop. No, not a Elon Musk project to transport people in Tesla vehicles underground. That's a different thing. This is about feedback or the lack of. You do know what an open loop system is. You do know what a closed loop or feedback loop system is. You use them every day. You may not know what they're called. If you find you are doing something and no one seems to be listening to your submission of a support request or similar, you may be in an open loop. The most common example of a feedback loop is your oven, or maybe if you have an air conditioner or a heat pump of some sort, some temperature control system in your home, whether it's for cooking or for comfort. The feedback is the thermostat, the thing that's probably in a hallway or on a wall somewhere, or in the case of the oven, in the oven. So when the thermostat provides feedback to the temperature alteration system, whether it's a heater or a heat pump to heat or cool, the thermostat will send a signal that says, oh, the temperature is something. And the temperature system, the heater, can turn on or off, or in some cases alter its output to increase the heating or decrease it based on the temperature. And there's a whole control theory notion that goes around that. So in the case of a city, suppose, I don't know, an entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem where here, and we wanted to know how it's doing. How are things? We may not care. We may operate in an open loop fashion. Let things fall where they may. Or we may get feedback from the entire system if we can. That's really hard to do. Or from indicators of system health, right? How is our ecosystem doing? We can ask questions periodically or provide a way for feedback update events. People may want to submit issues or comments in a way that would be helpful, not tweets and Facebook posts and so on. Those are more impassioned and biased and noisy, if you will. But if we could do that, or we can just make decisions. We, not being me, of course. We make decisions and then hope for the best. Or probably even worse is to actually have some feedback, but selective feedback, and feedback that gives the wrong impression. If in our temperature control example, I put the thermostat for the house, for the home, near the oven, it will probably give incorrect results. It will lead you to believe that it is warmer if you're cooking something, if you're baking a cake or something. The thermostat for the home will register a higher temperature than is true for most of the house. Do you believe that might apply to the Formula One race scenario? Not saying just yet. So feedback or no, open loop, typical. Usually somewhere in the middle, there'll be some feedback. Open loop is possible, but in a public system like a city, anything with a electorate, a constituency, there will be those who will not tolerate not being heard. And so a true open loop government is difficult, possibly impossible in our situation, in our case, in the U.S., pretty much everywhere here. But then the question becomes, where is the feedback coming from? From which components, which parts, which sections, which groups, and what is done with that feedback? So let's let's dive in a little bit and see where it goes. And again, this is a great topic for ongoing conversations at some point. The links section, of course, in your wherever you found this audio program. Hopefully, the show notes in the description of the episode are visible. We'll see. I have my typical links, the buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo and the ko-fi.com, ko-fi, clearly intended to say coffee. ko-fi.com/Dan Hugo, buymeacoffee.com/Dan Hugo, both links in the show note links. And again, I use Buy Me a Coffee as a place to list my various audio programs and projects. It's a single page profile that I can maintain easily, kind of out of the way, but visible. If I don't have a blog up, or if I don't have a particular website functioning, or if I'm, as is the case today, in the midst of attending a week-long, ginormous trade show, convention, conference, whatever CES really is, and not doing the things like putting up websites for each of my audio programs, which I have domains for, so that we can self-host our content and make it visible in the ways that we would like to. Even though I haven't gotten feedback on that, I know it's essential to be found and for information to be easily accessible. So that's high on the agenda. But using Buy Me a Coffee, it makes it easy to put it all in one place. Either way, you do not need to buy me a coffee. You can click on things and listen and enjoy, share with others. There you go. Although, if you do decide to, quote, buy me a coffee, I actually spend any such monies on coffee. True story. I've put 3 Wikipedia links in there as well. I've chosen Wikipedia because we are not doing a systems engineering class today. So it's just so you have a starting point if you are curious. Open loop controller, which is the open loop part of what we're talking about. A control system is where, just like the oven, like I said, temperature controllers are almost always used as a basic example because everybody uses them in some way wherever you are. So open loop controller, feedback, or feedback controller. It's just called feedback on Wikipedia. Feedback is where you actually get the feedback from the thermostat. Open loop would be turning the oven on and letting it heat up until something happens. If you turn the heating element on and just let it go, it may reach a peak temperature and nothing bad will happen. Ideally, that is how the oven is designed, so that you cannot let it run away, heat up and melt itself and burn things and so on. So without feedback and open loop, things will run as they may. And you will find out eventually, even without feedback, if things went horribly wrong. And then, as it happens, open loop also applies to game theory, which actually kind of figures in here. An open loop game is one where the players of the game, the participants in the gaming scenario, and gaming here in this case is not Monopoly. Well, although Monopoly does actually fit into game theory, but it is the theory of how people interact and make decisions and strategize how to do that based on what the other players are doing, what the stakes are, what the risks are, and so on. So an open loop model, you don't, as a player in the game, you don't know what the other players are doing or have done. You only know outcomes. So that could apply to a city. In a closed loop game, you get to see the history of, say, poker, card discards, plays, any gaming where you can look back at the history, you can develop some notion of what the player strategy is and so on. So that will come up later, but just an interesting variation on the use of the term open loop. So what is open loop anyway? I've already sort of spelled it out. It's the opposite of a feedback loop in this case. It is difficult or rare to imagine a completely and totally, truly open loop system, especially when it comes to people. If you are allowed to speak, you will provide feedback at some point. Outcomes can be measured and determined. But if you have a system of some kind and you interact with other things or people, you can design your system to receive that feedback, or you can leave that to chance. And so the open loop, you could have feedback that never goes anywhere. Do you get that sense sometimes? In that case, the system is effectively open loop. So yeah, sure, submit a bug, file your complaint. We'll just never read it. So effectively open loop. Although the consumers of services or the people that are providing that feedback or the systems that are responding, they may have been designed, or they may behave, or they may be thinking with the presumption that that feedback will be honored and used. And so that can lead to problems later. And then, as I said, the game theory implication, if other people know what other people, well, if person A knows that person B, we could do Alice and Bob if you like. If Alice doesn't know that Bob has filed an issue, and Alice and Bob are neighbors, so Bob has said, hey, there's a beehive under this panel out on the sidewalk. It's on city property. And Alice wants to do the same thing. She doesn't know that Bob has already filed it. She doesn't know that the city has already responded and said that's actually not on city property. So you have to find someone else to deal with it. So Alice would do the same thing. And in fact, everyone might do the same thing. So without visible feedback, if in an open loop system from the game theory standpoint, the participants in this scenario don't know what the others are doing. You also don't know the responses. So in this case, even though there was a feedback loop, a response was received based on the feedback that said, hey, not our problem. Does this sound like a true story? The participants then don't know about this feedback. They also wouldn't know that no action will be taken. And anyone else who assumes they may, and if you don't get a response, you may say, well, I contacted the city. And so other people may not if they do talk to each other. But if they're, then it's not truly open loop. But anyway, so as soon as people are involved, there are some nuances. But it is interesting to note that whenever you have some sort of a system where people or systems in small systems components in the larger system don't know how to talk to each other or how they are interacting with the city in this case, whenever that happens, mayhem may result. Again, this is not a systems engineering class. This is merely some commentary on the open loop nature of a city or a locality and where I think we can consider and ponder and maybe even change some things, especially here in the Greater Vegas area where this podcast is produced. So how does this apply to our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem? So knowing what is working and what is not, even in the Vegas sense, Vegas, not Vegas, although that also works, requires timely feedback from people, businesses and infrastructure. In fact, the whole thing, the more data you can get in a structured way, not noisy, not unknown sources, not inconsistent times, all sorts of chaos, that introduces a whole nother control theory problem. But if we can measure the impact of decisions, actions, and behavioral changes on the city side, what happens on the people, business, and infrastructure side, then, and if that's all publicly visible, then we will understand what is working and what is not, and what has happened as a result of those decisions, actions, and then the behavioral changes. Occasionally there's some feedback indirectly. You get that in news reporting. People will blog or post on social media. They'll post a sort of heavily biased description of a particular situation on something like Nextdoor or community forums, a Discord server, a Slack. And these can be problematic because they're super biased. Very rarely will people post a positive report description. Often the Yelps of the world, Yelp-like reviews, are a place where people can complain or they give a very positive review, but it's questionable whether those are biased. Right? So presume that when people do take the time to blog or get on a news report, and I'll give an example in a moment, but you can assume that those are biased. In the example I'll give, I'll be more clear about that. But there's substantial bias in those reports or in that feedback. That feedback may not actually go to the system. So the feedback in the case of like a news reporter asking questions like, how did this affect you? What's the ongoing implication? That news report doesn't necessarily go to the cause. It's just broadcast to the world, and it's presumed that the person that made those decisions that are impacting the people that are being interviewed will, gather some information from that. Perhaps maybe they'll reach out directly. But this is an indirect feedback loop, so those are tricky. They may be variable in time. They may extract not only delayed information, but inconsistent in time and detail, biased, incomplete, etc. So it's not ideal, but often that's what you end up with, is sort of a barrage of chaotic feedback noise. It's hard to make decisions on that because the bias, if you believe the feedback without accounting for the bias, you may overcorrect, you may make decisions that have unintended consequences, and so on. That's the nature of government. Often there are actual feedback elements, but they're inferred or captured directly, but they're treated as indicators. They're not actual signals to the system. So you may look at, in a place like Vegas, you could look at gross tourism numbers. If you don't know how many tourists, visitors, I don't know if they're, I think they're visitors. You don't have to be a tourist, you can be a visitor. If you only look at an opaque number, like, more people came for that week, therefore they must have been here for that event, you are jumping to a substantial conclusion based on this opaque data. So that feedback indicator is not truly a signal of how visitors reacted through their attendance to a particular event that was happening during that week. You could look at CES, for example, as I've mentioned. We are about to end today. You could say, visitors to Las Vegas were increased by 300,000 over the week before, and are approximately the same as the year before for this time frame for this event. And from that, you could infer that they must be here for CES, but you would actually have to look at batch scans, and you could look at hotel, resort, airport, car rental. You could look at a lot of signals and determine a closer value to as far as feedback. So what do we need to do to better accommodate that change in attendance and visitorship, I guess, to the greater Vegas area? Most of those visitors are in a particular region, right? If the same number of people visiting specifically for CES were just here visiting to do a collection of things, all the various parts of our fabulous, fun economy, that is a different case, and that's the sort of the steady state case. People come to Vegas for a variety of reasons, but if they're coming here for a specific event, you have to do things like have law enforcement do traffic controls. You may have to enlist the help of the local public transit system to enable shuttling of people between sites, and so on. So knowing specifically where visitors are participating in which events helps to make better decisions. So that's a form of feedback. If you didn't have any idea, you may believe that having some Teslas underground in a tunnel is all you need. But the feedback makes better decisions possible. Likely, that's a different story. So let's do some examples here in Greater Vegas specifically. Obviously, and this will come up later when we do the Fun Economy, F1UN, Fun Economy post episode. But the Formula One race had some severe open loop issues before and after. There was construction problems that arose. There were announcements of construction for the race, for the different viewing locations and the pit stop area. So there's a lot of impact to just through road construction. Now, Vegas is used to having road construction. If there is a road not under construction now, it's because it will be tomorrow. So the open loop issues arise when data on the status is taken from some sources, but not all sources. Oftentimes the news reporting on it was dire, but the indication of success, the general notion that Formula One racing is good, come more from the resorts, the casinos. Was gaming revenue up? Were hotels booked? Were rooms occupied? Did Formula One itself have what they would call a successful event? If those are the feedback sources, if those are the signals you're receiving, you would say, oh, Formula One was great for Vegas. If, on the other hand, you include feedback from small business owners that were near racetrack locations or who can show measurably that the change in visitor numbers, visitor participation in different locations, right? If an event like CES or Formula One draws the typical visitor to a particular location and draws them away from the typical entertainment expenditure, the fun economy expenditure. So people that would normally have gone to a show, to Absinthe, who instead attend CES or Formula One. Now CES, because it's every year around the same time, that's been factored in to day-to-day business. Something like Formula One was extremely impactful. This is the first year. Some of the feedback that small businesses can provide would be valuable. From what I'm seeing so far, I'm seeing news reporting on it, but I'm not seeing acknowledgement of it. So that'll be an interesting case study, especially as we look further into this with another episode of In the Post Fun Economy show upcoming. Visitor data has been sort of published. I want to dive into that a little bit. But anyway, the signals are incomplete. Decisions will be made in the absence of consideration, perhaps, of all of the available information. So you get some bias, right? If your motivated reasoning is operating, you might say, well, the people that I wanted to make happy seem to be happy. And you can turn down the volume when you're hearing all this complaining about losing money and never being able to recover. These complainers, right? I don't know if you remember this. Joe Lombardo ran for governor on the notion that we are the most entrepreneurial state. Anyway, I'm not particularly partisan. Just seems silly. Political comments like that are not great. Repeated claims that we will be the next Silicon Valley is explicitly leaving out feedback from the systems involved. Education, innovation, infrastructure, innovation culture, and existing innovation. These efforts that are in businesses, small businesses, any research projects, any upcoming startups that are trying to get some seed funding to take an idea and turn it into something. Where are we in that? The next Silicon Valley, we should have a buzzing innovation. Well, there should be innovation in the air. How about that? We should be able to hear it. We should be able to smell it. We should be able to taste it. Innovation takes many forms. It could be food, drink, the newest, latest, bestest application, technology, biomechanical, medical, whatever. So these are the sorts of things that should just be in the air, and we should hear about them. We should see them. They should be in the news. People should be talking about them. So if we believe that we will be the next Silicon Valley, but we have no feedback that says, yeah, that's probably true, then the headlines become unbelievable. And the supporters of this notion become unbelievable. If the feedback is, maybe we're not going to be the next Silicon Valley. Maybe we should be a better Vegas. Yeah, that was self-serving. You've heard me say that many times. But if we actually listen to the data, or if we read the data, if we look at the data, if we consider the data, we don't have what it would take to be the next Silicon Valley today. Will we have it tomorrow? Probably not. Will we have it in 10 years? Maybe. But only if we listen, if we take the feedback and we control the evolution of our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem based on that feedback. So if we develop in an open loop, if we merely say, we're going to be the next Silicon Valley, sprinkle some money on a few favorite projects, and I guess nothing will come of those, but hey, we're going to be the next Silicon Valley. Well, that is not helpful. So we can fix that, maybe. My favorite topic, as you know, our public transit system. I will use system loosely here. They make it difficult to provide useful feedback. You can speak with a driver. You can call and speak to someone on the phone. You can waste your time going to the window at the BTC, for example, the Bonneville Transit Center. where I think it says something like customer service or something. No, that's not what that is. Don't even try. So they make it very difficult to provide useful feedback. There is yet another application. Using our bus system here requires you have an entirely separate mobile device with enough memory to load up all the applications needed, developed outside of the state. You need to load up Transit Watch, and you can provide your feedback. In some sense, this is open loop because they do make it very difficult, and it's not even clear that when you do provide this feedback that it goes anywhere. I know I've filed some issues. I've even made a complaint or two now and then for some egregious problems. And it's extremely difficult to know if anything comes of it. So if you look at the game theory version of open loop, that's the example here, is that when you call the transit system, when you use the Transit Watch application to file a bug, and they have Transit Watch there for even some dire things. We're not touching on that, safety issues and whatnot. Just your run-of-the-mill, hey, this bus stop smells like urine. Hey, this bus didn't show up. Hey, this driver thinks they're a Formula One racer, taking the turns such that people in the bus are having to hold on for dear life. Like, these are unsafe things in general. They're not immediate safety issues, they want you to call 911 for that, and justifiably so. But just like, hey, maybe this person needs to understand how a large, heavy vehicle works. How does momentum work? Things like this. So we don't know that other people are having these problems. We don't know that a particular driver tends to run late, tends to drive too fast, tends to hit the brakes too much. We don't know that a particular stop is closed. I've run into that. The transit system doesn't always update their GTFS static files. So this happened on the Strip more than once, and elsewhere. A stop indicated on the map, still on the schedule, closed temporarily. So when you reach the stop, I guess the bus won't be stopping here. And you can watch the bus drive by. You're like, oh, I wish I would have known this. I would have gone to an active stop. So there's no, then who am I going to tell? I can say, hey, this bus stop is not open. But I will tell someone who may or may not acknowledge, and then anyone else who is impacted by this closed stop will do the same thing I did. And they may take the time to file a transit watch issue or call. They may not. But the fact is, because it's a completely open loop system, we all spend a lot of time wondering if the bus is going to show up, if I'm in the right place, what other bad thing will happen. You never know. So the private rider feedback is private. You can tell the driver. The driver may or may not tell anybody else. So you're just never sure where your feedback is going, and you're never sure if the feedback is being consumed to be used to take corrective action. So you'll never know if there was corrective action. There you go. Perfect. So what can we do? Obviously, an engaged, informed public is important, especially if you are in a city or other locality. Greater Vegas, I use that term frequently because the city of Las Vegas is a particular advantage of being able to speak. Still looking for it. The city of Las Vegas is a particular region with administrative boundaries and rules and laws and a city council and so on. The greater Vegas area is what a visitor to Vegas thinks is Las Vegas. So the Strip is not in Las Vegas, even though it is Las Vegas. So Clark County and unincorporated Clark County, Enterprise, Paradise, etc. So there are places around that are governed by one group or another group, etc. That makes things a little bit complicated. But it is essential that the people in these localities are informed and engaged, and that feedback, if provided, can be provided in a useful way, but also in a way that tells the person taking the time that what they're doing is valuable and will result in some sort of positive change. That would be wonderful, wouldn't it? So we can actually make that happen. The city of Las Vegas and Clark County, I'm not sure about Henderson and North Las Vegas or elsewhere, but there is a third party called SeeClickFix. It's a website, but I don't know the company. I'm not looking at it at the moment. SeeClickFix. You can file an issue there. They are public, so you can actually read what other people have submitted. I believe occasionally they will indicate when there has been action taken. They also import and export data from other platforms to try to keep the SeeClickFix visible database of issues reasonably current. So kudos for that. I honestly don't know how effective it's been actually in use, how actually effective it's been. So I believe the city of Las Vegas has rolled that out in the last several months. I don't believe it was up a year ago, up and running. So the ability to capture resident citizen feedback when it comes to things like abandoned vehicles or maybe a beehive. Time will tell if people actually make use of it and if they're satisfied that their effort is worthwhile. I have seen myself that people like to complain. I like to complain too, that's fine. But they do so on platforms like Nextdoor, and it's not clear. While these platforms are monitored by city, county, etc. And in fact, it's my understanding that Nextdoor provides facilities for that monitoring in an anonymized way. So city staffers or law enforcement, etc., they may be able to see some posts, but they'll be anonymized. So you don't necessarily know who has complained about the police department or who has made some sort of a accusatory statement about inaction from a city agency, etc. So I believe that's how that system works. So somewhat interesting. You can see what your neighbors have noticed, observed, commented upon. Not always clear that action is associated with those. And if you are not in a particular neighborhood, you don't know that there's that problem. That problem may exist in other places. So it's a case of a subset of feedback. It's not always completely clear or offered in a structured way. So a little more nuance there. We can make feedback as the other side of a coin visible, but we also need to know when the obverse side, the action, is taken based on that feedback. So if we know there's a problem and you give feedback, you've submitted your SeeClickFix issue. If you never receive a response, if you never see that there was some corrective action, like the beehive has been there for another year, and again, I actually had a beehive thing that I contacted the city and they didn't do anything. If you don't see action, then it's hard to justify providing that feedback. So the other side of the feedback coin is the action, corrective usually. And if you're an Android user, you know that it's very difficult to get customer support. Similarly, this happens with city, county scale scenarios. Not having the facilities in place to not only accept feedback from your end users, your residents, your constituency, your customers, if you don't have the infrastructure in place, not only to receive them, but to process and respond in a useful way, and then to connect some corrective action to that feedback, like, oh, by the way, we fixed the problem you reported. Thank you. Which, by the way, is great incentive for the person taking the time. Oh, it was actually worthwhile. I will do that again next time I observe something that might be fixable. That's great. That's high value. So not having the facilities in place is bad. It makes for a waste. It makes for a waste of the time. Maybe I won't issue my feedback if I'm not going to get any action from it. I'll just complain on Nextdoor. I'll tweet about it. And I myself have tweeted about RTC, that's our Regional Transit Commission, issues now and then because otherwise there's no action. And I still don't know if there's action, but it's sort of a receipt at that point because anyone who wants to look can see what I've suggested. Hey, there's a problem. Hey, this thing is broken. Hey, this handrail is not attached to the floor. True stories. So by making them visible, maybe it's an incentive for action, but it is also visible to others in a public way. So public shaming the bus, who knows? The first step in actually making a smart city smarter, in my opinion, is to enable public feedback in a structured way. So not issuing angry comments to a platform like Nextdoor, but actually indicating, here is the thing. If you have a list of system components, for example, bus, driver, bus stop, security personnel, etc. So if you list off the elements involved, you have to enable like a wild card because you can't account for everything or how people might describe everything. But if you say, was there an issue with this, the nature of the issue, the time and the place, and Transit Watch does do this in fairness. So if you call about a public transportation issue, you're able to just opine as you will. If you use the Transit Watch app, there's a few forms, what time, what stop, what bus route, etc. So if you can gather that structured information, you can actually make sure that it ends up in the right place for analysis and consideration and hopefully corrective action. Ideally, you will have a feedback mechanism back. You receive feedback, now feedback to the source and say, oh, hey, we addressed that issue. We've cleaned up the stop. We've advised the driver to slow down, etc. So if we escape the forum post, which is often not visible to anyone not seeing that forum, we have surveys and polls. We connect feedback to action, and we can see a history of action, right? So if I can see, oh, hey, this problem at this place was fixed, but it's a problem again, and you can look back and say, oh, it was a problem a year ago, and then 18 months ago, but it's fixed, but it's a problem again. Well, maybe there's something going on here, right? But if that information is never available, then you have no idea. Nobody has any idea. And it's hard to have confidence in a system when it is completely invisible, opaque, as we say. So if we can connect effort, action, and outcome, and they are seen and understood, the value of providing the feedback goes up, not only for the person or the customer, client, etc., doing it, but to the city, county, agency, company, and then they can give feedback, and there's a loop of participation and confidence building and positive outcomes. Who could argue with that? And then wash, rinse, and repeat. Just keep doing it. So that's basically today's episode. I'm gonna consider heading to CES again. Maybe. It is Friday. It's a good day to ponder instead of negotiating the crowd. It is a short day, if I recall. I think the show ends at 4. It ends at 6 the other days, but I think it's 4. So we'll see how it goes. I myself have had some positive meetings. I've given them my feedback. So things went pretty well. CES is a pretty good show. CES, the CTA, the Consumer Technology Association, does actually ask for feedback. I have no idea if they do anything about it because the show has a couple of things that could be better. They seem to be problems every year, but that's the way it goes. Security staff, other staffers, not necessarily invested in the positive experience of the attendees. That's something I would address, but that's not for today. So on that note, I will remind you can check out buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo for my various productions and projects, the Let's Innovate for Vegas podcast, audio program, this, Cafe Genius Impresarios. I would very much like to have guests if you're interested in participating in a conversation about our entrepreneurial innovation ecosystem. We're focused more on the entrepreneurial ecosystem here, and then the Let's Innovate for Vegas is more about innovation, but hey, take it. And I have my other shows, Quaggling Sand and FFS Talk. Those are guestable also. And then some other stuff will end up on that profile page on buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo. Don't feel like you have to buy me a coffee. It's more a resource which happens to have a tip jar, but use it as you may. And I will leave it there. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing and liking and subscribing and all those other meaningless things. Catch you next week for our normal, long, heavily opinionated audio programming. Take care. Happy New Year. Cheers.